Hi. You know
Well,
what I was wondering about? How much damage you could do in a minute? You really had a set,
right.
really had a sense of a minute. It was very exciting. Yeah.
Welcome everyone who's joining us. My name is Gabriella Cisneros, and I'm the creative director at Porchlight Book Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I have the honor today of welcoming author Laurie Stone. Laurie is the author of 5 books, most recently streaming now.
Six.
Oh,
Six
six.
books.
Everything. So streaming now, everything is personal. Notes on Now, and My Life as an Animal stories. She was a longtime writer for The Village Voice, theater critic for The Nation, and critic-at-large on Fresh Air on NPR. She won the Nona Balakian
Balakian.
Prize in Excellence in Criticism from the National Book Critics Circle and 2 grants from the New York Foundation for the Arts. She has published numerous stories in such publications as N+1, Waxwing, Tin House, Evergreen Review, Electric Lit, Fence, Open City, New Letters, Triquarterly, Threepenny Review, and Creative Nonfiction. Her new book, streaming now, Postcards from the Thing That Is Happening, is a collection of hybrid feminist narratives that perfectly captures the many paradoxes of the COVID-19 pandemic, contrasting the seemingly never-ending public catastrophes we experienced as a collective with the isolated, often mundane lives we carried out in private. So welcome, Laurie. I'm so excited to talk about streaming now.
Hi, Gabby. Thank you for doing this. It's wonderful. We have already met in a sense, so I feel like we're just continuing our previous conversation.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of your doing this. It's total fun. And you wrote this beautiful piece about the book, and that was one of the earliest responses anyone had to it. So it was exciting, to realize that we had already made a connection really through the book, that it was already a conversation that had started there through reading and writing. So thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I thought we would just do a written interview, so I'm glad we can talk about it because I feel like there's like a ton to talk about in such a small, it's not a thick book, but so
no, it isn't. It's also not a very long book.
right. Did you want to start?
I know this is all. I can hear.
Sorry, I'm going
Reading
to
some
plug
stuff.
my
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Are you okay? You plugged in? You're all plugged in.
Sorry.
So I'm going to read. Okay, is that better? Can you hear better now? Okay, so I'm going to read 2 sections from the book, and then we're going to talk about the book or anything that you want to talk about. And for guys who are out there listening, and it's weird for me because I'm used to seeing the faces. I'm just going to pretend I can see your faces. I wanted to read 2 quite different kinds of pieces or examples of pieces that are in the book. So the first one is about Jeffrey Toobin's penis, which we've all heard about or did for a while. Let's see, when was it? It was 2020. Oh, it's quite a while ago. The penis has cooled off, but it's still in the book. So I wanted to read some things that I thought about in the incident, in the event. And then I wanted to read part of the ending of the book having to do with leaving my apartment in New York. So anyway, those will be the 2 sections. And I'll read the Jeffrey Toobin one first. It's just going to be 3 paragraphs. So if this is, you can make some, write some questions down if this is something you have them about. A few days ago, after New Yorker writer Jeffrey Toobin accidentally exposed his penis on a Zoom meeting, lots of women I know fumed against him on social media. They saw him as a bad man and his actions bad for women. Apparently, while in a meeting with office colleagues, Toobin was masturbating to something on another screen and thought he had switched himself out of the office meeting. His colleagues saw his penis for a few seconds and he was mortified. It was an accident. He was not trying to flash them or masturbate in front of them as a turn on. Okay, so then I think I switched down to here. Okay, then that was the beginning, and then it goes. There's some more stuff, and then I want to read you this part, and then another paragraph. Women like me, who were interested in the categories of outrage against Tubin, were called defenders of his actions, and called this because, as women, we had been trained to give a woman pass to misbehaving bros, while we would give no such support, it was claimed, to our sister hooligans. Many women hated Tubin because, they said, if a woman had exposed her genitals during a meeting, more hell than could be imagined would have rained down on her. Plus, no one would come to her defense. The same women also declared that no woman would ever be caught in such a situation because they had better control over their carnal impulses than men did, or because they had more respect for their colleagues than Tubin did. Women had more respect for their colleagues because they were more high-minded, more considerate, more concerned about not losing their jobs, just better humans, owing either to their individual betterness or to being female or to being more distant from their own libido, which endowed them in some unstated way with betterness. Rather than wishing no one be punished for showing their genitals by accident or on purpose to other people, showing their genitals a part of the human body, not rubbing them on unsuspecting passersby, rather than encouraging this freedom, a thing feminists would gain from, that their bodies are forever managed and reviled, the women who hated Tubin wanted him to be fired and felt he had forfeited his credibility as a journalist. Okay, so then we switch down to the very last piece where I, otherwise known as, summarize the whole piece, which I a lot of it out. Okay, to review, a man who may be a dick for reasons publicly known and unknown, who accidentally shows his penis to a group of professional colleagues, is not a dick because he accidentally showed his penis. He is not a dick because he was masturbating. Everyone masturbates or they are wasting their lives. He is not a dick because he was thinking about sex while thinking about other things as well. This is known as ordinary existence. The penis unwrapped is not ipso facto a thing that needs to be escorted off the premises. It's a body part, a tube of flesh that can look beautiful or like a small turtle head pulled back into its shell. The incident is funny. Mistakes are funny. If you want to see this guy punished, what is his offense? Okay, so that's the Tubin piece. Okay, do you want to talk about that, and then I can read the other part? Did you have any questions about this kind of writing? We could do that. Okay, let's stop this and then talk, and then I'll go and read the other piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
I made a note for this. I wanted to know how you begin to write about controversial topics in possibly controversial ways, because this isn't the only section, because you also in lesser instances you talk about how you don't like films that might be well received otherwise, and you talk about writing a story about a dead dog that made your friend hate you, basically.
Yeah, it was her dead dog.
Right.
Yeah.
And you didn't give her permission first. So, but you say in that story that you wouldn't go back in time and not write the story, which I feel like is controversial because it's hard to do something that loses a friend.
No, but I did say in that story that I would have told her. I wouldn't have blindsided her. I think, and also I might have decided not to publish the story in the way that I did. So there's never any unwriting of writing. So maybe that's something that you're wondering about. Does anybody or do I never unwrite myself.
That makes sense.
I mean that's like self-censorship. And there's enough of that outside me, so I don't really have to add to that particular burden. But I think that all writers have to decide when, where, why to share or publish, really publicly something they've written if it's going to possibly cause pain or damage, or or just have people hate you. Sometimes there's too much of that and you can't stand it. I mean, in my case, to parcel it out a little bit. But your question is how do I do it?
Yeah, I guess.
Because why would that be hard for you?
Maybe because I feel like I can never tell if, like, because controversial topics, I feel everyone expects a black and white answer from, and I think that's why it's hard for anyone to write about controversial topics, because they always feel like they're not on the right side. Maybe
there used to be a time when there was a lot of gray, but I know that that's in the sort of historic past when dinosaurs walked. But there used to be analog, rather than just binary ideas. I think there still are. I'm joking ish, but we do live in a super coercive time around consensus, a kind of consensus coercive world, which I think has, I don't know how to evaluate the effect of technologies and media in our lives. I've never known how to do that. And I always am suspicious of people who claim to understand, oh, this caused that. And, if it weren't for this, we'd have, whatever. But that notwithstanding that I don't actually know anything about it, probably social media has very strongly transformed our sense of oops, I might say the wrong thing, and then I'll get the pack against me. And the pack is huge and it's instantaneous, and it can hurt people very, very badly, as we can see, in all kinds of cases. And sometimes a lot of people who don't deserve, does anyone deserve to be hurt by the pack? I don't know. Probably, yeah. Harvey Weinstein did. That was a good thing, in my opinion, somehow finding a way to nail him. But, or other rapists or other people who commit those kinds of crimes. But that does make it harder for people to say maybe the simple true thing, which is often the simple true thing is often the thing that people are trying to keep away, keep out of the human conversation, such as, I suppose, with this piece, with the Tubin piece, what interested me was the category mistakes that feminists were making about what they were unhappy with. Let's just call it unhappy. There was a huge amount of outcry. There was a lot of, call for reprisals against this person. And then an adding on to the fact that he showed his dick accidentally. You have to believe he showed it accidentally. He was mortified. That, he was also, had a pregnancy, with someone and wanted her to have it. All kinds of stuff was brought in. And each time I'd say, yeah, well, what does that have to do with the dick and the meeting? Because, that really has to do with the person's mind who's decided these things go together. And I feel like thinking about the categories that we think about, thinking about the categories we think about is really important, both as a writer. And I mean, this is the way I have a philosophical bent. I'm thinking, well, what are we talking about when we talk about X or Y? What are we talking about when we talk about sex? What are we talking? And especially as a feminist, the women's movement from the get-go has really had a kind of divide in that a lot of people entered the women's movement as a way to get away from sex and men, if they were, involved with men. Or to think about some form of essentialism, that being a female or a woman had some kind of component to it that translated beyond hormones and genitals into some form of being a human being, with not only attitudes, but structures of thought and understanding or feeling, right, emotions. So they had an essentialist idea, and then in that essentialist idea, a woman was X and Y rather than human with vagina and stuff. They thought that conferred on female humans a kind of superiority in some areas. No, wrong, bad, stop, no, just get out, go somewhere else. Okay,
Yeah.
for people like me. So my interest in being a feminist was to deconstruct all forms of essentialism, any idea of identity that had become fixed and to which was attached all kinds of meanings that were going to hurt women in the long run, endlessly. My interest was in opening them up and saying, where's the truth in this? Where's the ability to prove it? Where's the science? Where's the evidence? There isn't any, because we're not really essential, creatures. So, but nonetheless, there were this sort of people also like me interested in creating a movement for women that would allow them the same freedom we thought men had, at least to move around, public and private space freely without escort or fear of, of being controlled, or herded or, hurt or killed. And the same kind of freedom to have sex without the opprobrium of, whore, angel, virgin, that binary that was organized for women, to sort of put women in a different framework with regard to sex. So that was one of the things I wrote about a lot, at The Voice, everywhere, because what do we mean by sexual politics? We mean all kinds of things by it, right? We mean the sexual double standard that's a social construction. Men can, but women can't, or whatever, that double standard of male, female. And the idea that there really is a binary that means anything. I don't think there's a binary that means anything. I think it's it's organized and structured. And I think the trans culture, and I think basically what we were trying to do in the women's movement was to say we're all trans, but that's not to say that there isn't a separate kind of experience for people, changing their, medical and legal sex identity or gender identity. That's a different element of it. But the idea of the blurring of the boundaries, which seemed to me always to have been blurred, has been reinforced by trans culture. And there were trans people very early involved in the women's movement. Kate Bornstein was a feminist who was a trans woman, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the things that interested me very much from the beginning. And also, I liked sex. I mean, I was curious about sex, because why not?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of instances in your book where I think what you're talking about is like repression, and how like repression is seen as like this great, like that's the ultimate thing, is like repressing who you are for like this greater idea of feminism, maybe.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do you feel that has an impact on you?
I mean, I don't think I I read a lot of books that just like weave sex into them as much as in your book. Like it's so like natural, but like not in it feels like in other books it's very fictionalized, very like cinematic, like very romanticized, I mean. But you're very good at like talking about it as part of your life, I guess. Not just sex. It's like every element of what you felt and did during the pandemic, and just as a woman, you're able to talk about that in ways that are like, how to describe it? Like, sorry, I have to look at my notes. I'm like, I don't know, because I think I found it most interesting how you were able to talk about yourself, but then you switch to like films and TV so easily, whereas films and TV are not real life in any way. But then we're reading about something that's very mundane, very like, especially during the pandemic, it felt like everything was kind of mundane. So I think that's what I thought about a lot, is the juxtaposition of those two stories. Did
it make you feel like you could see your own life in different terms, not as mundane? I actually don't think that anything in the book is mundane. I know that that word is there, but I think it's the wrong word. I think quotidian is the right word. I didn't
Yes.
write that, so I moved back from that because it's actually a pejorative to call something mundane. So I think one of the things you have as a writer, you have two options really with writing about anything. You either make the strange ordinary or the ordinary strange. You know, those are the ways that work. And so a lot of what's happening for me as a writer in the way that you're looking at, oh, well, then she watched a movie and then she went and watered the garden and then she moved some rocks. You know, that's what she did. But what does she think? Where's the thought in action as the character is moving through these motions? And, you know, that you could really, I don't really think this is certainly my aesthetic in general, not just in this book, that there's no such thing as an intrinsically interesting subject or an intrinsically uninteresting subject. It's really about what does the narrator make of this thing that's happening, that pulls the reader in. And so my question to you is, as a writer, did you feel more liberated to try to combine some of these forms yourself? Would that be something you would feel you could experiment with?
Yeah, I was just thinking kind of a question, kind of a like a writing philosophy is like, when you're writing, how do you write in that way? Because when I was just thinking, I was just writing something the other day and I was imagining it kind of like, you know, as actions, but you're not writing based on actions at all. You're writing based on,
you think taking a hose and turning it on and pointing it at a plant is not an action?
well, it is. You're not just describing it. You're like describing another layer of yourself when you're doing those.
That is correct. That you just press the magic button. That's exactly right. It's the layering. And so to answer like I guess, you know, what you're really asking is a craft question. How do you make those sentences? That'll be especially clearer in the other passage I was going to read, which is more narrative than this one, which is, it is narrative, but it's also, you know, critical in a sense. You know, it's looking at, in a way, abstract ideas. And in terms of, but you can create a narrative that too, but let's leave that aside and just go back to the idea of how some of this could be implemented for you in your writing, which is that it's extremely intentional, the practice that I have. Anyway, I theoretically could make getting a splinter into a story. I probably have. But why? Well, because of whatever's, you know, how long I would look at the piece of wood and what that might, you know, generate for me or stir for me. What kind of wood? What part of the body is it in? How did it get there? You know, what might it be reminding me of in terms of other moments of impalement? Or how does something so tiny hurt so much? I mean, I'm just making this up as we go along, but that is actually how I think as I write. So there's no free writing. It is a very intentional practice, which is also a process of thinking about language and stuff that happens in order to turn it into narrative. And what I mean by narrative is generate a connection to the reader. So the reader feels like they're being spoken to very directly, as if I'm, you know, the way we're talking now is the way I hope that my narrators feel on the page as you're reading, like, oh, she's talking to me directly, and using the techniques of spoken word in written word. Learned very much from monologue, you know, writing about theater for a long time and film. You learn to use the techniques of speech. You know, if I can't read aloud something I've written and it sounds unnatural, it's not ready. Even though I know it isn't mainly going to be heard aloud or read aloud by anybody but me, it has to sound like music and it has the rhythm of speech. And it still has to be able to think with that rhythm of speech rather than moving into abstraction. So anyone who's taken a workshop with me, and probably there are some people out there who know that what I teach in the workshops or emphasize for their writing in the workshops is exactly and only what I know how to do. And it's, it's not a million things. It's a certain prescribed number of things. So that's how it happens. But it's not hard to jump in and try it. And I can tell you more another time. But just to say, it isn't accidental. It looks happenstance. 100 things happen in the course of a day. Why do I pick that moment to remember? That rock that I was looking at, and the lizard walked on it, and I wondered what the lizard was thinking, and why was there a lizard here? We're not in Arizona anymore. Whatever, that kind of thing. But no one really ever knows why they plucked those. I mean, Virginia Woolf talked a lot about, why do certain things stay and why do they not stay? Probably, what she thought, it's the unresolvable moment that we remember, or we keep going back to, or we attach to. And another strong element in my aesthetic, whether it's accomplished or not, is not for me to judge, is that I think the most dramatic moments in writing are a kind of excavation of contradictions that can't be resolved. They aren't the black and white. They are not the kosher think and the unkosher think. They're not the right speak and the wrong speak. They're this much more mushy, well, what if? But on the other hand, I don't mean in that, sort of tendentious, I would say, and studied Talmudic sense of argument. It's not that sort of, unnecessary picking apart of anything that's said. It's more internal, and so this other thing that I think about a lot is thought in action as a way to make a dramatic moment on the page. So thought in action, the monologue, the soliloquy, the character who's learning something in the moment of thinking about it right then. And I try to recreate that on the page as if I'm having the thought right then and there. And often I am. But of course, that's not the only draft,
Right.
It came that way. It appeared, in that moment. So any other thoughts that you have about any of this?
Yeah. How do you... So you're basically writing about all these gray areas of life?
I guess, I think it's not that part. It's something you can reflect on after you've done it. I don't do that. I just go where the heat is. It's like I run my hand over the surface of my body brain, or my physical body, and something will jump out, a moment, like I had lunch with a friend yesterday. We pulled a rope off of a deck that wasn't being used because they weren't open until 5, but it was hot, and we were in Lenox, Mass. And we both decided to just, what the hell, they'll either chase us off or they won't. But we were able to sit there for 3 hours, and nobody bothered us, and we were, under like a roof outside deck type thing, and it was great. And I'm, like I haven't written about that experience with Wendy, but what I would probably do when Richard and I write is think about maybe one thing that happened in that lunch that stuck with me, or I wanted to go back and think about. And it's often an image. Something happens that, when I think back to something, an image will jump out, and I'll start with that. So it's not, and then you're making something out of nothing, basically. But that's what you're always doing. That's what. Unless you're Alfred Hitchcock and you've got the whole movie in your head, and you can storyboard every scene before you've shot it. I think we all work in this improvisatory, building it step by step way with our art forms, with language or notes if you're a composer, or pigment and light if you're a visual artist, or all of the other media people work in, steps if you're a choreographer. Combinations of steps, if you're going to make a dance. So so that's similar what I do.
Because you've been doing this for a while, right? Something I wanted to ask about and bring up to anyone who doesn't know you, who's watching this. I read about this thing you did in 2005 at the Flux Factory.
Yeah. It was so much fun. Yeah.
It sounded wild. So you were in like a constructed sort of box, like housing.
the people who were sort of heading the Flux Factory at that time, Morgan Meese and Stephanie Goldberg, and then they had other, sort of fluxy, people in their sort of committee, the steering committee of it, came up with this art project called Novel. And so they put out a call for submissions. There were writers submitted to be the kind of display entities, and then visual artists and architects who would build the houses for us. So 3 writers were chosen and 3 architects were chosen to build the structures. And my architects were really highly accomplished architects. They were not just starting out. They for some reason, they just wanted to do this. And so they built me an amazing house, just incredible, a teeny house, But anyway, the houses all were in the art gallery in the Flux Factory. So the Flux Factory was half, like rabbit warrens of tiny rooms were like 20 or 25. It was a commune, an artist commune. So they had little spaces where they slept and little spaces where they had, I guess, studios. And then the other whole entire half of the building was a gallery where they would exhibit. So for a month, we were the exhibit, these houses, and people could come. And every Saturday night, we would give a reading. Okay, the challenge was you had to write a novel in a month. If you stayed in your house and you didn't go anywhere and they fed you, could you do it? I just thought, oh, I could get out of my apartment, So I applied, and they were very happy to have me. And then I got hooked up with the architects, who were fantastic, and they built me the house. And then it got to be a big media event. So famous chefs were coming every night to cook dinner for us, and it was reported on, and the readings got bigger and bigger. Anyway. Everyone I knew, everyone who knew me, I was 58. Now you know how old I am. I was 58. And they said, "Are you crazy? You'll hate it. You won't be able to control anything, blah, 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 And I thought, I don't know, I just wanted to do it. And so it was fabulous. The 3 writers were we got to become an entity and a team. And my way of handling the yuck factor of the common bathroom, for example, that the Fluxies were all using, and the common kitchen, they would cook for us, and we would have our own food in a separate refrigerator. All of that was provided, but still, like breakfast and coffee in the morning and all that stuff, you had to go into the jungle of the common space. So I just decided every morning I would just get up and clean it. And it was clean the bathroom or my path through it. Clean a sink, clean a toilet, clean a shower, and then not care about it for the rest of the day. It didn't matter. It just absolutely didn't matter. And I was in bliss. And I got Bose headphones for the rest of the time. So the noise was canceled, and I was working away in my little house. And it was heaven. It was really heaven. We had a roof to exercise on. Wow. We really liked each other. We really got along. It was great. It was really great. So
I've never, that sounds like an amazing experience. And it also, compared to this book, I think you said something in the article I read, the idea of escaping from TV, all media, was very appealing to me. And compared to this book, you write a lot about TV and media. So I was wondering how you're able to balance that. 'Cause there's this, you want to be able to, or to get away from that entertainment in order to write something, but then have a book out about that has a lot of about that entertainment in it.
I don't remember writing that, but that's interesting that I did it, because I did write a piece about the experience in the Flux Factory. You probably read that somewhere. Yeah. So I'm sure if I said it, I must have meant it at the time. Or I lied. But in reality, no, I don't have any problem with, I don't feel overwhelmed by, I think I would feel overwhelmed by the opprobrium of a ton of social media hatred. I think that when that happens to people, and that is scary, and I don't like it, and I don't want to step in the line of it, and I could. So I'm trying not to. So, but The rest of it, you know, I'm very good at controlling. You know, only I would never, you know, it's like being a day drinker. You know, I'm not a day TV watcher. You know,
That makes sense.
so I don't feel like I'm not scared of this stuff. I want more. You know, I can tell you right now that I just finished watching This Is Going to Hurt, which is about, it's a British seven episode show that was on AMC. It was wonderful, really, really good. And the very last chunk of Better Call Saul has started, the last, I guess, 5 or 6 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. It's just great. It's just great.
You posted about it on Facebook today, I think.
I did. Yeah, yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't stop. Yeah, because of Kim. You know, Kim is, she's alive now, at least I think so. I hope so. Anyway, do you want to talk some more about your questions, or should I jump to the other?
Oh yeah, let's go to your other piece. Maybe that'll, yeah.
Okay, how are we doing with ish? Yeah, we're good. Okay, so this is a little bit longer. This is about leaving my apartment, and for good. I'll try to. Can you hear me? Okay, everything's good.
Yes.
With the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to see where. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's a couple of pages. If it feels like it's too long, I'll jump. The other day, I decided to give up my apartment in Manhattan. Manhattan is where I was born and have lived most of my life. If I don't live there again, well, okay. Becoming a person who does not live in New York City is like waiting for the buzzer to ring before a date. When you dance around to Jimmy Cliff singing, the harder they come, the harder they fall. You dance around because you can see the night unfold and you have gotten dressed too early. When I clean out a place, I become lighter. Becoming lighter, I add to the time I have left. Who would not be happy? Floor of a room you will never see again, tearing a life to shreds. In 1978, when I moved to my apartment, I was with my dog and Gardner, the artist. My intention was not to die. That was it. Other than that, I didn't think far ahead. The rent was $290. I knew a woman who liked me, then turned the opposite, then liked me again. She was moving into the apartment of her boyfriend and said I could have her place. It was on the Upper West Side. I didn't think the Upper West Side was where I should be. In those days, I said okay to all sorts of things I thought were fleeting, and that became marriages. In this type of building, there was a thin rat with a greasy look you had to slip money to in order to get the lease. You would slip 1 month's rent into his outstretched palm under the table, as the saying goes, and under an actual table, if memory serves. Before moving to this apartment, I had been living in a rental house in East Hampton, where I met Gardner. We rented a truck for the move, and the truck got a flat tire on the Long Island Expressway. It was raining. I was driving the truck. How is this possible? Someone fixed the tire. It was a time in life when these things happened. If it happened now, would I write about it differently? Then I'm going to skip a bit further down. Okay. I smile when people think I know what I want. I'm not the kind who can picture the dead animal down the road that would make a nice filling for a sandwich if only you could walk over and hack off the meat. I took the apartment for sex. The city was sex. I thought if you felt an impulse and you were a female human, you should do what a man would do, which is what a dog would do without foreseeing the consequences. I thought I should learn all I could learn about sex for no reason other than I was curious, and there was nothing to stop me. I lived in the apartment alone all those years. Solitude is sex. People would stay over, but they didn't live there. Years ago, maybe 8 or 9, I packed up the apartment in order to sublet it to a friend and move my belongings to Arizona, where the man I live with now was teaching at a university. With a New York City rent-stabilized apartment, you have to be in residence for 6 months and 1 day of every year, or risk losing it, unless you install a tenant the landlord approves of, and then only for 2 years maximum. We packed the books into towers of boxes. We had a sale during which I watched my beloved bike wheeled away and other items I had depended on drift off. I did not want to disappoint the man I live with now, but I could feel myself moving along on a conveyor belt, much like the conveyor belt I had stepped onto when, at 19, I agreed to marry a lovely young man in order to secure another apartment, this one downtown, that required my father to co-sign the lease. My father said he would sign the lease if I agreed to marry the young man I was living with. I did not want to get married, and I did not want to move my belongings to Arizona. I did not want to spend even 1 hour in Arizona during the years I was there in order to be with the man I live with now. I did not think my belongings should move west when, in time, I hoped we would together move east. The man I live with now could see I was sad. After a few days of packing and negotiating with the landlord, he said, "Don't do it. Keep the apartment. Spend the time you need to here. We'll be okay." And that's what we did. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons I have wanted to build a life with this person. That, and I like talking to him. One more thing at the very end. In the apartment the other day, the art gone, the rugs gone, some of the smaller furniture gone. It's weird. I've never felt this way. It's already no longer the place where I ever lived. It looks like the set for a play that is yet to be built. Props strewn about for scenes that are disappearing as objects are packed into boxes. The way I live in the past is to make the same mistakes I have always made. The apartment looks like an archaeological site without a history of importance. Not because nothing happened there, but because whatever happened there happened to someone who cared. Time feels sped up, as if there was all the time in the world to do nothing important. It was always just living I was doing. That's it.
I feel like the danger of reading words about a different time, like a past time, especially like in 2020, reading things about then, it's so nostalgic. Like,
well, I just realized the emotion would just, overwhelm me. But it did. So there it is. Yeah. It isn't that long ago. I mean, we really just moved. We bought the house, but we only moved the stuff out of the apartment to this house that we're in now in November. So it's July, but I only gave up the lease on the apartment in January. So it's really not that long, like a half a year.
Okay.
Since no more apartment. So it's more recent than that long ago. Anyway, so that's a little different in terms of tone.
Yeah, it reminded me the way that you're able to not just like kind of jump from detail to detail of these like moments and events. It's like I'm able to follow it so easily despite the jumping, but also you're able to like include so many different tones. Like you're very good at incorporating humor, maybe like kind of sardonic humor in like, it's very subtle and I love it. It's very human, to have humor in there. It makes it feel personal. Like the whole, I mean, obviously the collection is very personal, but it still feels like something that we can relate to. I think not just because, also because I think you told me before you don't like to include people's names, which I appreciated it so much, like the man I live with. And I'm like, that is the best thing. I'm going to use that in my own life.
Well, I got it from Edouard Levé, the French writer we were talking about, who wrote Auto Portrait and Suicide. He was mostly a photographer. But he said in Auto Portrait that he doesn't use proper names in his writing. And he said, why? And then, in a sense, epithets, because they convey the information the reader needs. I mean, one of the things I'm always thinking about is, does the reader need this information in order to continue reading the story? And so giving information on a need-to-know basis, which is the idea for me, of narrative, or what I'm trying to do in narrative. Why tell them a name if you can load in their meaning to the story without the, the name doesn't matter. Who cares what they're named? But that we do care that this guy who moves around time and space is the one she lives with, as opposed to the one who fixed the tire, on the road,
Right.
etc. Yeah. So I do that. But I think with a novel or anything that long, you would get too tired. It would become tiresome. It's that these pieces aren't that long. But of course, you read a whole book of it. So, and I have other books where you get that too. So these recurrent characters, they can still be, the sister. I don't really refer to my sister by name, but she comes up. I don't know. I think maybe once she's called her name was Ellen, and she's in this book quite a bit, right? Because
she's what starts it off.
She starts it off, yes. But she actually died longer ago than this book started to be written. But who knows? I just pluck things out of, old writing and move them around. It's like, some people make clothing that way. Somebody's, should we look at what they're writing? What do you think, Abby? Somebody's written a long thing.
Oh, yes.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Oh, but she likes us.
Oh, Vince Passaro.
Oh, Vince. Oh, that's Vince.
Do you know
Vince? This is all Vince. Is it all Vince?
Yeah. Yes. Laurie's sentences
cool.
and paragraphs are contrapuntal.
Puntal. Oh, that's beautiful. Puntal. Yeah.
These are great words. I'm learning so much. Her narratives move on the principles of counterpoint, that things look or feel at first as if they don't go together is on purpose and the point. That's great. Yeah. Things that don't go together. I was gonna say it's kind of like a collage. Like the whole book is a collage of moments in your life, but also not just like moments, because you put a lot of your own ideas on feminism and that like the whole feminist movement in it really well, I think. And I guess that's one of my questions too, is how would you, like, this isn't a book about the pandemic, really? Would you consider it a book about the pandemic?
No, it just happens to take place during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I would say.
How would you make a book, or I guess why did you decide to like put one together that kind of takes place over the pandemic?
I don't decide those kinds of things. It's so interesting. I think some writers, I think everyone works their own way, and if everyone can make a very different way of working work for them to produce something glorious and beautiful and absolutely compelling for readers. I'm really working small and letting small build, more like an Afghan quilt.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be boring if it was really an Afghan quilt, because it would just be those squares and the same stitch and that kind of thing. So the quilt thing isn't quite right, but the making of the small pieces to see. So I think internally, that's how I make a piece. Let's say a 2,500 to 3,000 word piece. They're often made up of smaller pieces. Now, it is not arbitrary why one is there and why one chuck is there. I'm working on a new piece right now and I can't get it right. The music's not right. There's too much of the, it's like making, I know I use all these analogies. Now I'm going to use cooking. You can't, it has to feel more musical ultimately than anything to me, which I think the counterpoint is really very relevant. But it also, it can't be too much of the same. Like if there are too many reviews, take that one out. What's the most interesting one? What's the one that I can keep that also refers in some imagistic or feeling way to some other things that I've also written about that don't have to do with the film? What might become like a unconscious reference that I can then make conscious? Those kinds of choices. But ultimately, the sentences themselves, each one has to earn. This may sound incredibly pedantic, and probably it is, but I really work at the sentence level. That's why can't think that far ahead. The paragraphs will take care of themselves, believe me. If I stay out of the way of getting in the way of the reader to what I'm showing the reader. So my narrator has to constantly look out. My narrator can't ask you for sympathy or for any kind of specific emotion. And the way that the politics comes in is I write through that consciousness, not very often about it. The reason I don't write about it, except in something like Jeffrey Toobin more often, is it's boring. It's not interesting. It becomes too abstract. I'm not really interested in abstraction. I have to dramatize something, fully on the page to get the reader to keep going. But you can have thought in action. It can be dramatic. It absolutely can. But then you're working with the monologue form of the soliloquy. And that's where people like Spalding Gray come in for me. So hugely helpful as a writing instructor. Like, how do you write so that it sounds like speech? He created them really through improv and then set them. So it doesn't, I do the opposite. I write and then start to speak. But that sense of spoken word is very important to me. And I hope you could see that even though I haven't really rehearsed this stuff, I'm trying to read it as if I'm talking to you, this stuff that I've written. But the piece that I'm working on now, and I can't quite get right, I will try 5 or 10 or maybe 20 different chunks. There's a chunk missing. I just know there's a chunk missing. And I've been, I'm just going to work until it was sounding a little too know-it-all-y. The narrator was a little too showing what she knew it too much. So, I could see that. Actually, Richard's very good. The man I live with, he's great at saying, too much salt, add some vinegar. But, in relationship to language, too much of the tone of that, pull back. And, we need to hear something else. We need to go outside if we're inside. We need, basically the kinds of things that you would think about yourself. But it's so much better to have a great in-house reader, which I do. He's an extremely good reader. So, and I trust him, and I can usually just go back and say, oh, what a great idea. Bye. I have to go work on this now.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
super helpful.
Yeah, I think it's hard to get out of, for me to get out of my own head and ideas, because my brain can fill in all the missing details as I read my writing, versus having someone else around who can say what's missing is very helpful.
But a lot of what you and I talked about when we had our first conversation was that you were interested in the nature of the jump cut or the montage that you see in this writing. Mm-hmm. How much the reader doesn't need to know. How much is the reader will fill in. If you move them from point A to point B, but you don't take the subway and show the token going, well, we don't have tokens anymore. Slide the Metro card in the slot. If we don't go there, if she's in one subway station and then she's in the next subway station, we can realize that she took the subway, and there was a platform that was probably smelly and noisy. It was probably a rat, on the tracks eating a nice piece of chicken, etc. We don't need to see all of that if we really want to move her through time and space quickly. So that's what I'm saying about the jump cuts and the montage. Or this seemingly weird stuff of saying leaving an apartment is like waiting for a date, for the buzzer to ring. Why? I don't really know why. I just felt it could work. I literally, I don't logically cannot tell you why an image like that works. Mm-hmm. Some of them are just tries, they just throw it down, see what happens. But the language itself, the sentence itself has to be evocative.
Yeah, there's a lot of imagery, I think, that takes place in very sparse language, which is always mm-hmm. surprising to me. You don't have to build out a whole paragraph to describe something in order for your writing to allow the reader to envision it, which I think has taken a lot of time probably for you to
learn how to do. Yeah. Yes, no, that's absolutely true. And one of the things that's giving me so much pleasure is that our conversation is that the book was working for you also as some form of model. Oh, I'm really interested in the way this writing works. How does it work? Let me take it apart a little. Let me try it. Because that's exactly what I do with the people I read. And they have all helped me to build this aesthetic or this, aesthetic du jour. Mm-hmm. The writers like Spalding Gray or Edouard Lavey, who's very interested in lists. Learning to write lists was so liberating. I mean, think about it. You know, a list can do the whole work of a story if it's a clever list.
Right.
So, you know, so if this book works like that for anyone reading it, like, oh, I wonder how she did that. Lydia Davis, when Richard and I first got together and we were doing these experiments of, you know, we write together to a prompt. And that's what pretty much produces a lot of the pieces. And then I write a version of them and put them on Facebook. And then I start to play with them later on to make a piece. Lately, that's how I've been working. Anyway, we were, you know, he read this book of Lydia Davis's and he understood her, and I never could understand her at all. I didn't understand, why did people love her so much? And he did. And then I said, wow, I see it, I get it, I can. And then we started to try to do like a Lydia Davis story, where anyone we were reading who Patrick Modiano was a writer we both loved. We often have similar tastes. I like Paul Lafarge a lot. I'm going to read with him actually this Saturday. I'm very honored because I think he's a great writer. But he was writing these stories in the New Yorker for a while, and I was really taken by the narrative voice of these stories. So, you know, so we tried to think, what's a Paul Lafarge story? You know, and they took place weirdly in the same locale that we live in now. He just happened to be living here before me. So I think that's great. If my book works that way for anyone as a writer, that makes me super happy, and it makes me happy that you felt you could try out some of these experiments.
Yeah, it's really inspiring just being able to read something new, like in a new voice. I think, even though, I mean, now that you have 6 books out. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay.
I got you now.
Okay. I'm going to ask one of the questions. Someone had a question.
Please.
Greg Williard.
Yes.
If you know. Okay. He said, who did you once mention as an important influence in constructing collage sentences?
I think I've been mentioning. Oh, I think he's thinking of somebody. I already wrote that to him, but it was a friend of mine named Brandon Judell, and he asked me about that, and I thought I had answered him in a private message, but that's fine. And Brandon is this. He has almost like a stand-up comedy shtick in his writing and in his persona. You know, because he's a teacher and he's a great teacher. The students adore him, and I have sometimes done workshops, you know, with his classes, etc. But so I learned a lot from stand-up, actually, because I also wrote about stand-up comedy quite a bit. You know, one of the books is called Laughing in the Dark, and I used to have a column in the Village Voice called Laughing in the Dark, and I would go to stand-up performances and write about them as theater, really, as, you know, as theater pieces. And so it takes a comedian about 7 years to do 20 minutes. Think about that.
Yeah, that's
average.
That's too long for me.
Well, exactly. But you can see what's involved, what, you know, the timing and the pacing, and how many bits and jokes you would have to get rid of in order to keep. And most of the ones who were very good and who got to that level, you know, would say, yeah, that's what it takes. So, so studying the product was very interesting. Also, in comedy, you can make a transition by just moving your body or just looking out or crossing your arms. So what would be the writing equivalent of that gestural? I'm just going to talk about something else now, but it doesn't work unless eventually the parts start to talk to each other. I can't tell you how you know they are. That is practice. Mm-hmm. But you know it's not done until they are. Otherwise, it feels too random for the reader.
Right. Yeah, it's really incredible. Like, so it's been about an hour now, so I have to start closing out. But yeah, if you're watching this and you haven't read Streaming Now by Laurie Stone, you really have to like believe, like, to understand what we're talking about, kind of, but also like just it feels like it's a good resource for just another type of writing that you might not read very often. So you can buy that. I think we will be sending out emails for thanking people for attending this, and you can find a link to the book there. And then you can sign up for our newsletter, which will also be linked in there, because we have some other interviews coming up in the next few months, which are exciting. This was my first, and I'm so happy I got to talk to Laurie for it, because
it was wonderful, Gabby.
you're so good.
Thank you, and you too. And how do you? Can I read these comments after we finish? Because I can't read them while we're talking.
Yeah.
Will it stay up?
I'll end the broadcast soon. Okay. Anything
No, but
else?
I don't want you to end it if you don't.
Oh, no. I'll end the broadcast and we'll keep talking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But do you have to end it now? Is it time for everybody to go? Do they want to ask any other questions?
Yeah. Did anyone have any last minute questions?
Maybe not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Cool. Also shout out to Dottir Press for being an awesome publisher.
Wonderful. And Emily Baumgardner is great, and Karis Caputo, who works with her, she has a fantastic staff, and Kate Heacock, who's the publicist. They're the best, wonderful people to work with. I'm so lucky and happy with them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby, for having me.
Thank you, Laurie.
It was